So I'm here in the Tom Keneally Centre at the Sydney Mechanics School of Arts, and I am very excited for you to listen to an interview I just did with Margot Stephens. So Margot is an internationally renowned artist, and she is the sculptor who made the Louisa Lawson statue, which is in Mudgee, and it was unveiled this March for International Women's Day. We have a great conversation about process and practice, about the all the details that go into such a huge project and all the people that are involved. You probably are aware that Louisa Lawson was a prominent member here at the Sydney Mechanics School of Arts in like the 1800s. She was a trailblazing suffragist. She was the first ever female member on our committees, and yeah, and on one of our debating team as well. So yeah, anyway, I really hope you enjoy this interview. Again, thank you so much for being here with us and talking. I really like you to kind of talk to us a little bit about your process. So you've been a artist for 35 years in figurative sculpture. What was it that kind of took your inspiration? What was it about figurative sculpture that was something that you have dived into and kind of stayed with?
Um, I think it goes back to childhood and discovering clay and school and Helen Gardner's art book, or history of art, and seeing the sculpture in those books and playing with the clay that was on our property, and I don't know, I've just always had a fascination with the figure. Like most people, I started with drawing and drawing animals and drawing people, and my mum said from very early age I've been interested in portraiture. You know, as only mums would say, they observe these things. But yeah, so it's just a fascination, I suppose.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so it's all.
Sorry, the face is it's such a I at art school did one semester so of portrait painting, and it's such an interesting kind of thing to get into. You know, you have to get the body language right, the face right. Such little tiny details can have such huge impacts on the end result, you know, that you're sharing with people. And trying to get all those things into one piece is such a huge talent. So yeah.
It's a challenge, and I think that's what intrigues me so much. It's a something that I never feel I could master. I'm always learning, and I'm always challenged with each new portrait.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
And you like
those reasons.
working with clay? You like the idea of like actually tactilely kind of getting in there and
Yes,
sculpting?
absolutely. Like I said, clay was an experience. There, just as a child growing up on a property, I loved exploring the creeks and to discover that clay was not something that came from a shop, that just came directly out of the ground, and that you could model it, was a huge thrill, and so it sort of all began from there.
Yeah, fascinating. So we're obviously here to chat about Louisa Lawson statue, but I just looking at the kind of the work that you've done in the past, you obviously have done statues of lots of women. Is that something that you have been conscious about? Is that something that you set out to do?
It's interesting because ordinarily with commission work, you get lots of commissions for men. And so when the opportunity to do women has arisen, I've been really excited about it. Not that I'm not excited about the guys. The guys are interesting, but there are so few sculptures of women that are women of significance and not just ideals of beauty, that I found that just so exciting. It's quite thrilling to have that opportunity to do that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah, so
mm,
you've done a sculpture of Joy Cummings. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
um, That was an interesting process. Often I'll get a community group or a private person come and commission a work, but this was a public artwork so the commission came through the Newcastle Council, and it was open to all sculptors or female sculptors in New South Wales, and so it was a competitive process. And that we're invited to submit our portfolios, and then 3 sculptors were selected from those portfolios. The mayor, Natalie Nelms, I've probably said that incorrectly. She had a very specific idea in mind of what she wanted to see, and so of those 3 sculptors selected, we were then invited to present a design, a maquette. So we bypassed the whole sketch ideas stage, and that was interesting because I went to Newcastle and I spoke to whoever I could find that knew Joy Cummings, and I looked at the site where the work was to go, and I went to the library and read newspaper articles that were written about Joy, and honestly, it was a bit of a shock learning about the period in which she was elected mayor, because you forget just the sexism. She was Australia's first female Lord Mayor, and what she had to go through and put up with in order to make the changes that she felt passionately about was extraordinary. I mean, her courage was tremendous. And like I said, I spoke to people who had worked with her. One of the best stories I had was from a security guard that took me up to see the mayoral gown, which was it was like a not Douglas Adams, was it Get Smart episode, in which you had to go through so many corridors, locked doors, and into vaulted rooms in order to get to the mayoral robes with the gold chain, in order to take photos and the like. And he told me stories along the way about his time working as a young man and Joy being in office, and it's wonderful to get to know a person, because I'm not like, photographs are useful for the physicality, I suppose, but you need, as you were saying before, there's so much more to bringing a portrait about, and it's about getting to know the person, about what makes them smile, about where they're coming from, and hearing these personal stories just brought the woman behind the photos, behind the videos that I had, to life, and that was terrific. So then I was able to bring that into my maquette, and was really fortunate that my maquette was the one selected for that particular sculpture. Yeah. So that was a huge thrill.
Yeah. You've kind of gone into some of that research and that process. How do you deal with it? So going on to Louisa Lawson, how did you firstly come about this project, and and then how do you deal with the historical person, the character? Do you know what I mean? How do you, when you don't have the people to talk to, how did that all kind of come about?
Well, look, it came about from a phone call from the projects coordinator of the Rotary Club of Mudgee, and he said to me, he rang up and he said, "You've got to read an article in the monthly magazine." Now, this was in August 2020, and the article was written by Lesley Hughes, and it's called "Our First Public Feminist." So I went out and I bought the magazine, evidently, and read the article, and it's just the most extraordinary article about Louisa Lawson, and I think what inspired the Rotary Club of Mudgee was the subheading here: "Louisa has never been immortalised in bronze or stone, there are more monuments to animals in Australia than non-fictional women. And being a local woman and having been largely overlooked because of her famous son, the Rotary Club of Mudgee, which there are 2 Rotary clubs in the region. There's the Rotary Club of Mudgee and there's Mudgee Rotary. All of this
That's confusing.
Yeah. And the Rotary Club of Mudgee are the older people of the region, and the other Mudgee Rotary are the younger professional set. Mm-hmm. So it was coming from a group of retired professionals, mostly men. There were some women as a part as well, and some of them had been passionate Louisa followers previously. I had, until I read this article, like I've been out painting plein air in Louisa's vineyard. Mm-hmm. Didn't give a thought to who Louisa was. It was
just a connection, yeah.
There was, of course, the Henry Lawson Memorial, which is Louisa's home that her husband built for her and where she had her children. And there was a restaurant, I think, in town that was called Louisa's after Louisa Lawson.
But so all these things started to build. You could start to see how the impact that Louisa had on the area.
Yes, but nobody actually knew who Louisa was. Yeah. And this was kind of the point of this article about First Public Feminist, how we have the vote in New South Wales as a result of Louisa Lawson's campaigning, and yet nobody here, or largely anywhere, knows who Louisa Lawson is. So then where do you go from there? I went to the museums, the local museums, to see what they had about Louisa Lawson. They had a lot, and in fact dedicated museum to Henry Lawson, which had a little bit about Louisa in it. And I read any books that I could find about Louisa Lawson. So there's a very good book actually called That Mad Louisa, really appalling title, but it's quite a good book. And the name of the author right now escapes me. I have made notes, but they're all on my phone, which isn't helpful.
Well, don't worry. We'll find out those details and we'll put them in the little bio for the video. So yeah, don't worry.
Okay. So there's been books written. There have been academic articles. She was mentioned in Susanna Devie's book on Great Australian Women. Claire Wright included her in her documentary about those early pioneering women. So once you start delving, there is quite a bit of information out there. Just as a local person, though, until this came up, and I did start looking, and I'm not alone, you know. Until she arrived on the street in Mudgee, a lot of people had never heard of her.
Yeah, me too. It wasn't until I started here at the Sydney Mechanics School of Arts and realised that she'd been a member here, and then when you start to see the mountains that she'd moved here, so it's like she's the first female debater here on the debating team. She's the first ever female committee member, you know, and then you start to think, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, it is wow, because she was the second oldest child of a family, I think, of 12, something like that, phenomenally large family. And they were incredibly poor, like dirt poor. Yeah. They lived in shanties. She came from the poorest possible background, but just through her tenacity and strength of will. Yeah. And by using organisations such as your own, you know, she worked on improving herself all the time so she could communicate.
Yeah. And like the publication of the Dawn, you know, making jobs for women in that sphere. So then those kind of conversations could get bigger and bigger and bigger. And yeah, absolutely. So you had so you're based in the kind of the region that must be even more significant to you to kind of be working in this story. And so you've got some pictures behind you. You were saying that with Joy, you were able to, with that statue, you were able to talk to people, but obviously you weren't. So you went to you're saying you're going to the libraries and you're using images. And how did you come up with the composition? So the statue is sat on some books, right, outside the library. Tell me about that.
Well, in again, I think it was the book That Mad Louisa, and it occurs in different books. Gertrude has also documented, as a child, Louisa, in order to escape from domesticity, would escape to the bush, where she had made herself a shrine out of rocks. And whenever she was allowed to have some time out from domestic duties, she would go to this shrine, as she called it, and sit on it and write poetry and read the Bible. And so this idea of being able to escape and sit and write on this rock stack, and then seeing the significance of books to Louisa in her life, both through reading to her children and then later supplying books to outback children, campaigning for the school at Urundari. I mean, education for children was such a huge part of her work, that there's a symbol, if you like, of the book just was a reoccurring theme throughout her life, right up until, even when she retired, she was writing poetry and compiling them, stories, and so the book was a reoccurring element. So I thought, what happens if I change the rocks to books? And I found a poem, A Reverie, which was so apt to what we're doing now in remembering this one life and the rippling effect that it has had throughout our society. I thought, yes, I'll pop her back, sitting and writing this particular poem, which relates to us now, that has this lovely connection with history. And this is what I found in researching Louisa. Where I have grown up is just literally over the hill from where she had her home and brought up her children, and also the same hills where we would walk and pick up crystals. She was a great one for picking up crystals as well. She had an interest in spiritualism for a while, and
so it's the idea of you were almost stepping on the same foot. You were seeing the same thing.
Yeah. This landscape that has changed over time, but there was that connection through geography and landscape. So yeah, there was just always this feeling of I'm walking with Louisa, but separated by time.
Yeah.
And getting to know her. It was a really interesting relationship.
So I'd love you. So the statue was unveiled on International Women's Day this year. Tell us about what that was like. Was there celebrations, and what the reaction of the community has been to this statue?
Yeah, it was fantastic, phenomenal, actually. Probably will, I don't know. Who knows what happens in the future, but it was a remarkable unveiling in Lesley Hughes, who'd written this article initially that inspired the Rotary Club of Mudgee to take up the cause of realising Louisa in bronze. To then have Lesley come and do the unveiling was just that lovely connection back to the beginning. But Lesley Hughes, Professor Emeritus Lesley Hughes, is an incredible speaker, and she just spoke so warmly to the group that had gathered there, which was quite large. They ended up closing down the street because so many people came out for the unveiling.
Oh,
And
wow. That's amazing.
yeah, it was really exciting. And people had come from Lithgow, a sort of, what are they? There's an acronym for it, but people who like to dress up in period costume.
Mm.
And so there was a group of people dressed up in that sort of 1880s period costumes with votes for women banners, and it was a lot of fun. It was a really festive atmosphere. Mm.
Yeah, it feels like when you have public art, it's for everyone, isn't it? That's the intention, and it's brilliant to hear that it was such a success, and so many people turned out to kind of to see Louisa unveiled. It just seems amazing, really. So.
It was very much a community project, and to create such a work involves such a large team of people. So, I'm sitting here by myself. I'm just a small part of the group, the team that came together in order to make it happen. I mean, aside from the Rotary Club of Mudgee, the community they were the ones that funded it. So everybody came together and put money in towards it. I mean, Rotary had some fabulous fundraising ideas, but the money for it largely came from the community. So the community owned it.
Yeah.
And the costume that I used was created by a local dressmaker. That Louisa used to make her own clothes, so I'd taken designs for the costume from clothing that Louisa has worn, and then I had it made to fit a model who was of the same size. So my model, again from the local community, and Stephanie Phyllis did the undergarments for it, because these days we just put on clothes, but they layered, if you like, all of these undergarments in order to get the drapery to hang just so.
So wow, so you basically brought those images back to life, those the
Yeah.
drapery, the clothing, the way that
Yeah.
it would all sit and fit. That's amazing. So
I'm looking for a sculptor. I really need to have that visual impact to be able to see how the cloth with the petticoats and everything else on it is going to sit over the top of the book sack.
oh yeah, of course, how it would fall. That yeah.
Yes. And I got quite caught up just in the abstract design elements of those vertical lines with the horizontal lines, and yeah, it was really absorbing. It was lovely. Oh, and there was a graphic designer involved as well for the text to go on the books. So poet Jory Ryan worked with me on the wording for the text, and Professor Claire Wright from Melbourne, she was also involved on the wording to go onto the back of the books. Wow. And then there was a graphic designer, Lee Stephens. Lee used font from the period, but beautifully matched the font to, if you like, the feel of each of the book titles. So anything that related to children had a children's book feel to it, and it was all just so beautifully designed. So I'm just one small factor.
Wow, that's amazing. So there's so many different little pieces that have to be put together to get this final sculpture. But what an amazing team effort, vision, really, going in. And so you were there, and you've got the model with all the drapery, you've taken the images, you've got the images, the historical images of Louisa, and then how do you start? Like, how do you start with it? You've got your clay, like what was that like?
Well, I had the maquette, so we literally start with sketches. I come up with some different ideas, some designs from what I've read, and so the book stack was just one of a few ideas that I'd drawn up, and that was the one that the Rotary Club of Mudgee thought that they'd like. So then I make it as a maquette. So that's kind of fairly right, it's an idea. But then, because with maquettes, they look great at sort of yay high.
Yeah.
When you scale them up,
Yeah.
then of course you need to adjust for eye line, and that's the other thing that needs to be considered as you're scaling up, is where it's going in the landscape, and at what height will people be looking at it. So where do you want the gaze of the sculpture? And I wanted to include the streetscape into the sculpture, so people were invited to walk around it, but also the figure herself looks a little bit towards the town clock, because again, there's that relationship with time, and some of the issues she campaigned for, women's refuges and domestic violence was a big one that she, thus the being able to public speak.
Yeah.
But some of the issues that she was campaigning so strongly are still relevant today.
Yeah.
So I wanted that connection with our present sociology, I suppose, about our current issues. So I wanted to link the sculpture into time. So coming back then to how I built the sculpture, I started with the book stack. Dame, what's it, Mary Gilmore, her mother commented that Louisa was an untidy woman, which I find, in the home, she was said to be not domestically on top of it all. So the book stack couldn't be perfect.
Yeah.
It had to be a little bit higgledy-piggledy. I couldn't just have that sort of double helix kind of spiral happening. It had to be a little bit random, because she wasn't the sort of person that would have it looking just so, it would be just how. But by the same time, I wanted that spiral to lead people around the sculpture, so they weren't just all looking at it from.
It's fascinating. There's so many
It.
elements to this. The experience of the statue, like you were talking about, the way you move around it, and having to consider that, the way that her eyes are kind of the direction that she's looking in. There's so many things that have gone into this statue. It's just absolutely fascinating. So I just wanted to have a little kind of, what's your takeaway from this experience now that Louisa is sat there since March? How's the journey been since she's kind of come into fruition?
It's been lovely, I suppose. It might be a cliched word, but it has been lovely. People send friends who in town who see children go up and climb, around and touch the sculpture. Send me photos of this happening. So, and people come up and tell me how much they like the sculpture. She's been welcomed into the community, and that's such a relief. Because to have gone through all of that and to put her there, and they hadn't liked what they had fundraised for, would have been devastating. But no, she's been so warmly welcomed into the community. We had Pink Up Mudgee just recently raising funds for breast cancer, and somebody had put a pink lei, I suppose you would call it, pink flowers around her shoulders.
So she can be included. That's like
into the streetscape, and some people were like, oh, how will Margot feel about that? And it's like, Louisa would love that. She was all for campaigning for women's issues. She would love to have been a part of that.
It's fabulous that she sat there kind of being part of today's community. And I think that you and the team that have put this all together have put so much thought and consideration into this piece that's, like you said, for the community. So that's amazing. What can we expect from you next? What's the next for Margot?
Look, I'm working on some private portraits, but I haven't got anything as exciting lined up just yet, but who knows what happens in the new year.
Yeah.
As long as I'm doing portraiture, I feel like I'm in my happy place.
Oh, that's amazing. And thank you so much for like letting us into your studio. This is your studio behind you. So that's a brilliant thing for you to have shared with us. Really appreciate that. Um, so yeah. And I hope that you kind of keep in touch with us as well. We'd love to hear what's next with you. So yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And thanks for the opportunity to talk some more about Louisa.
Just want to say a huge thank you to Margot Stephens for taking the time to chat to me today. It's fascinating to hear all of the different layers and people involved in such a huge project as the Louisa Lawson statue. And what a treat to get to see her studio space. I am definitely jealous of that studio space. It looks amazing. It was great to chat through some of the processes that she uses in her work, get a real insight into her creative practice. And I feel like I've learned so much. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to this interview, and I'll see you soon.